You're listening to the Morphology Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Morphology Podcast, aka Murph here to share interviews about biking experiences from cyclists who have pedaled to places all over. Each week we will get to know new people and explore new destinations to ride your bike. As you listen to these adventures, you may wonder, why haven't I done that yet? Well, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to this podcast and give it a thumbs up if it's deserving. It helps me out a lot. And a quick shout out to Simmons Electric, our newest sponsor. Simmons Electric is a huge supporter of Iowa bike trails. Thanks, Mike, and everyone at Simmons Electric for supporting the podcast and for supporting bikes. Today, meet Denise Mueller, the fastest cyclist on Earth. Denise holds the world record for paced bicycle land speed, pedaling her bicycle at an unbelievable speed of 183.9 miles per hour. This type of record was invented by Charles Mile-a-Minute Murphy, who, while on his bicycle, drafted a train to set a 60-mile-an-hour record at the end of the 19th century. In order to accomplish this feat, a mile of plywood sheets was attached to the railroad ties, ensuring that Charles would have a smooth surface riding behind the train. Fast forward to 2016 when Denise was successful at setting the first ever women's paced bicycle land speed record of 147.7 miles per hour. But she didn't stop there. On September 16, 2018, Denise shattered the overall record of 167 miles per hour with a speed of 183.9. I'm almost hyperventilating just thinking about it. So here is Denise to tell more about this epic event. All right, well, on the show today, this is exciting. We have the fastest cyclist on Earth, Denise Mueller.
Yay, thank you.
How are you doing, Denise?
I'm doing great. Recovering from RAGBRAI and, doing a lot of drafting out there, but I am doing awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. And that segues into what I was going to say is that we had the chance to meet hanging out with the Primal Wear folks on RAGBRAI. And I was going to ask you, was that the first time that you've done RAGBRAI?
Yes, I was a RAGBRAI virgin.
Ooh, nice.
But I am no longer.
Yeah. And I was lucky. I got to see you several days, in your draft line, zooming right by me on bikes. And I would I don't know if you even remember this, but I would be like, go, Denise, go. I would yell at you.
Yep.
And then I'd be like, oh, shoot, I probably shouldn't have done that because she's going to look over to see who it is and then possibly crash. And I'm like, wait a minute, this woman has gone 183.9 miles an hour. She's fine.
Yep. Oh, yes. I loved the cheering and I loved all the camaraderie at RAGBRAI. And oh my gosh, that was, I have to say, it's like one of the funnest experiences I've had.
Really?
On a bicycle ever, besides, of course, doing my land speed record, which was like pinnacle. But
yeah, this
was so much fun. I liken it to, because everybody does it in their own different way.
Right.
I'm sure you have children, you have older people, you have everyone in between, you have fast people, you have people that don't ride a lot. Everybody doing it for their own reason, but our little group was such a blast to be around. And I swear it felt like a college spring break for a week, just, but on a bicycle. So
yeah.
I think that's the best way to summarize it from my experience.
Yeah, and it's a whole different experience for people who literally ride their bikes for exercise. This is like a party on bikes all week long. And,
Yes.
like you said, everybody does it their own way. And I don't mean everyone's like getting drunk all day, but it's definitely like a festival all day long. Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Yep. And I loved it when we went into the different cities in the evenings, and it was literally like their 4th of July for that particular city with some, I think 25,000 people, or I don't even know the numbers of how many, but I've heard all sorts of different ones. But I mean, for that city, it was basically, they honored all the cyclists coming in because it was a huge influx and an opportunity to, yes, like you said, a festival every night in each of the new cities, and they each had their own little flavor. So it was wonderful. It was heartwarming. definitely good exercise,
Yeah.
and wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
made tons of new friends too.
Awesome. And it's so cool that you were actually able to come and be part of RAGBRAI. So thanks for coming to Iowa.
Oh, well, my goodness gracious. It was actually Primal who made everything happen.
Yeah.
So they're basically, I think I'm part of the family there, because most certainly I've been embraced by them throughout the whole land speed record, with Dave Edwards, the owner of Primal, and believing in me through everything, and then literally being there and embracing me as part of the family throughout the journey and beyond. So.
A quick interruption to tell you this week's podcast is sponsored by Lizard Lips Lip Balm. These great lip balms contain natural ingredients, come in a variety of flavors, and you can choose certified organic or balms with sun protection. Check it out at lizardlips.net. Now back to the show. Of course, I want to talk about your world record, but before we get into that, you were a competitive cyclist for a long time as you were growing up into adulthood. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I started racing when I was 14 years old.
Oh,
And the
wow.
irony was, I was getting ready to get into, I believe it was, no, I was already in junior high. I just started, now it's called middle school. But it was in January of 1987. I was still 13. I had turned 14 in February. But anyhow, they had over the announcements that there was a Bike for Breath for the Children's Asthma League down here in San Diego, because this is where I'm from. And they had all sorts of different distances. And my dad decided, you know what, let's do the 100-miler. And I'm like,
Oh my
what?
gosh.
We had 1 month to train, and I was like cross country, soccer and things. So I was athletic, but not on a bicycle. We trained for a month. It was miserable. I did not like the training. I went to the event in February and loved it.
Oh,
We
really?
did the entire, ended up being 96.5 miles, because a radio station that had that same number was the sponsor. So that's how they had the mileage.
Uh-huh.
And I actually fundraised the most money and got a new bicycle. So I went from a mountain bike I was using for that 100 miles to a touring bike. And so from there, I was riding the touring bike at all these different charitable events,
Oh,
which I
wow.
loved. I mean, I went from not liking any of the training to all of a sudden I did the social thing. I loved the big group and doing these charity rides. So we were doing them every weekend all over the state of California. We'd drive, stay the night somewhere, and do rides. And so on one of these rides, well, during this also, I met one coach, which is Doreen Williams, and she got me onto the velodrome through a program that helped juniors, kids basically get on track bikes, be exposed to the bicycles, and it was the money left over from the '84 Olympics. And so that what funded this. And so I was on the velodrome and I was learning bicycle handling skills. And then I also started doing other things with my father. He got me to do a San Francisco to San Diego bicycle ride over 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
with the youth hostel. And on the last day is when I met my other coach, John Howard. And here comes a lot of this story. So I meet him in August of '87. So I'm 14 years old. I've been doing a bunch of charity rides since February of that year and loving it. Been out on the velodrome, learning handling skills. I see him go by me on the last day of this event, which is just going down the coast, and I hop on his wheel. I had no idea that 2 years prior, he had set the land speed record.
Oh my
And had
gosh.
the bicycle land speed record. So the irony is here, I hop on his wheel and start drafting him going south for about 8 miles into about Camp Pendleton was where he finally turned around and he's like, he's thinking, who is this little girl on my wheel? And so he asked my name and I was talking with him and he says, I need to talk to your dad, because it was just me on his wheel. And so he later that week met with my dad and he said, you need to get this girl into racing and she needs a new bike, because I was still in that touring bike that I won in February. And so my dad got me a bicycle, a nice racing bicycle. And within 1 month, I had done my first race and I won it. And I mean, I was this new girl on the scene, all these other girls my age who have been racing against each other forever. And then all of a sudden, this nobody comes in and wins the race.
Oh my gosh.
So you could imagine I was, again, hooked at yet another level. I ended up going from, that was in September of 1987 was my first bicycle race, and I raced all the way through 1991. I found that my favorite racing was mountain bike racing, because I got into that, I think, in about 89. Downhill mountain bike racing, so it gives you a little idea of a little crazy factor. and so with that, I got 13 national championships in all sorts of disciplines, whether on the velodrome, the road, or mountain biking. And then I got a second place in the world championships in Italy.
Wow.
For downhill mountain bike racing. It was the first year they had junior world championships for mountain biking. So that's my in a nutshell from 87 through 91. 91 is also the year I graduated high school. My parents were going through divorce in 90. And then there were some partnership issues in 92 with my parents' family business. And needless to say, I finished out my 1991 year of racing. I was sort of deciding what I wanted to do when I grew up, and decided to enter the family business. But I also was having some challenges with my own psyche and dealing with all of the successes I had had as a cyclist. I would show up to the line and I would feel the pressure I'd put onto myself about having to perform because I had been doing so well. And now I was going to transition into the everyday, female athlete, and the adult athlete, because I was in the junior category. And in 92, I would have been what they called senior, which had been like expert or whatever that, your standard, everything between masters and juniors is right in the middle there. And so it was going to be a big challenge for me. And I knew there was a lot of performance anxieties that I was dealing with. So I actually walked away from the sport, literally hung the bike up in 1992 before I even did the race season, and pretty much didn't touch it for 20 years.
Wow. And the John Howard that you met when you were 14, is that the same John Howard that was with you when you made your world record?
Yep.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's the amazingness of all of this is, yes, so John Howard did the world record, or broke the land speed record in 1985. He went 152 miles an hour. And so he was the one who got me into racing. Then I quit racing for 20 years, raised 3 children, ran the family business, did the career and family thing, as a lot of people would say. And then my middle son, because I've always been going to the gym and being healthy, my middle son, we decided, I decided I was going to do my first full marathon ever. When, back in 2009, I made the 2009, I made the decision, and in 2010 was going to be the race. Well, he decided he was going to do that too, and he was 15 years old. And so he ran his first marathon with me. And the day before said, "Oh, Mom, I want to do all the half marathons that Rock and Roll puts on next year." So that would been when he was 16, and it would been 2011. Well, I can train my son for one marathon using, your internet-based training schedule. I'm not going to be responsible for my 16-year-old son's, joint health and training program for 19 half marathons. So I reached out to John Howard, who I'd been in contact with, several times over the course of the 20 years, but nothing athletically involved. And I said, "Hey, John, how cool is it? When I was 16, you were my coach. And now my son's 16. I'd love for you to coach him so he doesn't get injured." And so he took up my son as a client, and then looked at me and went, "When's the last time you've been on a bike?" So I think you can see where this is going. He got me back on a bicycle. There was a charity ride coming up, and he suggested it. It was the right place for me. I'd been doing a bunch of running myself, and I went, "Why not?" And so my coach gets me back on a bicycle after 20 years. And then he saw, I guess, the talent that I did not even know I had, but he saw that spark that was still there, that crazy spirit of doing crazy adrenaline junkie things. And then he was the one who sat me down one day, and we were at lunch, and he says, I have an idea. And I'm like, what? And he says, sir, he goes, you like to draft? Yeah. You like to go fast? Yeah. You like racing cars, which I race junker cars. And he goes, and I go, yeah. And I'm sitting there going, what are you getting at? What are you getting at? Because he's like drawing me to the edge of the cliff. And literally, I said it was like a match to a puddle of gasoline that I was. And he says, you realize no woman has ever even attempted a land speed record, which meant I could be a first ever female to do something. And how many records are out there to where no woman has even attempted?
Right.
So within a heartbeat, I went, oh my gosh, yes. And so with that, he was the one who then also sparked that idea of doing the land speed record. And that's how it started, was to be the first ever woman, which took a 4-year journey to do. We obtained sponsorships. KHS and Primal were always from the absolute beginning, have believed in me from before even, the thought was, fully put together. Mm-hmm. And so we worked our rears off, and in 2016, we went out to the Bonneville Salt Flats, and I went 147.7 miles an hour and established the first ever women's record.
Wow.
And I have my Guinness World Book record. What they did was they split the record. It used to just be fastest fastest bicycle in a slipstream. And that was Fred Rumpelberg, who had beat John's record in 1995 at 166.9. So Guinness separated at male and female. So Fred still kept his male record, and I then established the first ever women's female record.
Oh my gosh.
And so that was technically what we went for, but things don't always quite finish the way we think they're going to. And this little competitive person called me, when we got out there, it's during an event called the World of Speed, and it's for cars and motorcycles, time trials for them to get their top speeds. And they were gracious enough to accept me as an entry on the bicycle, even though it was very unusual for them. But they had all the permits, they had all the timing devices, which made it an official event for me. So it's a 4-day event, and the first couple of days, since there's no way to really train for this in an actual motor pacing at that speed situation, I couldn't do it until we got out there. And so a few days before the event is the first time ever that I got pulled behind that vehicle, released, and then drafted it. And I was able to do that at 100 plus miles an hour. And I was like, oh my gosh. So everyone was so excited because I'd never even done it. It had all been all the elements of the training, but nothing all put together because it's impossible to replicate it unless you're there. Mm-hmm. So first day of the event was a lot of learning. I actually got shot out of the back of the slipstream a few times because my race car driver was accelerating faster than I could stay into the slipstream. So we were figuring out, and there's this oscillation. So she would be surging forward when I was floating back and pop me out. And so there was a lot of frustration of getting past certain barriers of speed. And so we sat down, we powwowed. So the second day we had some vehicle issues that we needed to address. So no racing for us on the second day. Third day, first time we go out there, again, we have a separation where I'm out of the back of the slipstream, and we're going, okay, so we stop and we go, let's figure this out. We looked at each other's video. I shared with my race car driver, this is what I'm going through. She shared with me what she's going through. We powwowed. We said, let's just get out there and get a good solid run with no separation as far as you getting out of the air pocket. Mm-hmm. And just go for successful, not for record. So we went out there, we did 140, and we're like, ooh, hey, I think we got the hang of this. And I call it almost our magical dance. And so the next time we went out there, we did 147.7, and we weren't even trying to do that. Wow. And in fact, it was like a run. We went, should we do one more? Should we not? I said, screw it. Let's do one more. Little did we know it rained overnight, and they canceled the last day. And we knew we had unlocked the magic dance with each other to where we weren't we were in sync with each other instead of stepping on each other's left feet type of thing, or dancing with two left feet, as they say. So we were so frustrated when we pulled up to the site the next morning and found out the last day was canceled. So we lost our opportunity to do what we knew we could do, which was at least 155. I mean, we both felt it that we were going to beat 155, which was, to break my coach's record. It still wouldn't have been world, but it would have broken my coach's record and really been a good women's record. So we walked away with a women's 147.7. And that day we said, screw it, we're coming back. And we're going to not only go faster, we're going to beat the men's record. And so we sort of put it out there without really thinking about what we just said. But it took us 2 more years to get back out on the 2 years, because we had to now get another vehicle, because the sponsors we had, we didn't even ask them, hey, are you on for another go around?
Right.
And some of them were, no, we're this is all. And like we had a Range Rover in the first one, which was a beautiful vehicle that could have gone 175. We could have done the record behind the Range Rover, but we didn't have enough practice and time to have perfected our ability. But the Range Rover had to basically go back to England. It could not stay in this country for the 2 years. And so we ended up using Fred Rompelberg, who is the current record holder, the current men's record holder's vehicle. And we had to completely overhaul it because it had been sitting for 23 years. And we went out there and broke Fred's record with Fred's car and literally shattered it by 17 miles an hour in 2018. So that's sort of, I know it's a long answer about how it all sort of came back together with John Howard. Yeah, so for me, the element is you got John Howard as the coach, the mentor, the idea generator, the one who got me into racing, the one who got me back on a bike after 20 years, and the one who formed this idea is so pivotal as far as the being in this land speed record, but also Shay Holbrook, who was my race car driver, not only in 2016, but also in 2018. And if I didn't have her in 2018, again, and I had a new race car driver, I don't even know if I'd been able to do it, because there's such a learning curve for the driver to be able to properly get me started. Because at the very beginning, I have to be towed because I have 1 gear. And I can't go 0 or 2 miles an hour and 180 some odd miles an hour in 1 gear. That's just humanly impossible. So I have to get pulled up to, at minimum, the 110 miles an hour, which we accomplished at mile 1 1/4 of this 5 mile long course. And it's only mile marker 4 to 5 that gives me my record speed. So from mile 1 1/4, I'm released. I'm able to push the gear myself. We continue to increase in speed all the way up through the 5 miles. And my average between mile marker 4 and 5 was 183.9 miles per hour, but I actually hit 188 in that mile.
Oh my goodness. I can't even, I mean, I've watched the video several times. I've talked to you in real life, but it's hard to imagine you on a bicycle going that fast. Like, I mean, I panic going down hills at like 35 miles an hour. So I just can't, like, can you give us some highlights of like what that feels like?
Well, the thing is when you're in that moment, there is no thinking of anything else. And one of the things I always talk about is I have ADHD. I embrace it. It's a beautiful thing. If you utilize it for good and know where your limitations are. But one of the things about that is within your life, your brain is going in so many different directions, thinking about so many different things and aware of so many different elements of things that are going on around you. So it's a very crazy world with ADHD, and it's just my norm. But there are those super high concentration times to where you are so in the moment, focused on solely one thing, that the rest of your mind shuts down. That there is nothing else in there. And my theory is adrenaline junkies like myself, I think, tend to be chasing what I call that nirvana of that singular focus, when literally there is nothing else in the world, in your mind, in your thoughts, than the one thing you're doing. And since it happens so rarely, it's almost like a drug for me. And I think that's why I constantly chase that adrenaline junkie stuff, is because it's nirvana to be in that singular focus. And so when you're going 180 some odd miles an hour, you're not thinking about what your left foot feels like. You're not thinking about what you're going to have for dinner. You're not thinking about what
Right.
somebody's thinking about you. You're not thinking about any other noises you hear because you're so in survival mode. The world shuts down except for what you're doing. And one of the things that I've heard other people describe, I've never been in this situation, but many people that have described, let's say, if they've ever been in a car accident, a high-speed car accident, and they said, oh my gosh, all of a sudden everything was in slow motion. That is perfect awareness. And that's what occurred when I was out there. I've often said the faster I was going, the slower everything was.
Oh,
and that's
interesting.
because that focus and concentration became so acute and so completely in the present moment, and it's in survivability, that everything slows down and it's very, very clear. And so that's why I call it nirvana, because it was just a beautiful, special place. Even though I'm in a life and death situation, it was this peacefulness. So it's very difficult to describe, but I can only semi-describe it with people who have been in like car accidents who, like I said, everything went to slow motion. Yep, full 100% concentration.
Wow.
So that's my biggest highlight of what, when people ask what it feels like, it's almost like going into another dimension. And but I also, the further away I get from it, because this was 2.5 years ago, and you know, the more I get away from it and see it like a normal person, the more I think I'm nuts too. Because people will go, Denise, you are crazy. And I went, well, yeah, but crazy in a good way. And then I look and I go, oh my gosh. I mean, I have 3 children. And at the time they were, 18, 24, and 25, or 23 and whatever.
Yeah,
so, it's just, so I'm sitting there, my youngest was 18. He was 16 when I did it in 2016. And then he was 18, and he was out there at Bonneville for both of those.
Wow.
He made sure he was there. And in fact, there's a wonderful video on my Facebook page, which is Project Speed Denise. If you go there and look at the videos, there's one of me, my son, videoing from his cell phone on Facebook Live. And it was him videoing, picking me up after my record run. And so it's him listening to the radio announcers, him with some of the press in the vehicle. And what his job was is, when I'm done, because after we hit 5 miles, it takes another 2 miles while I'm being slowed down by the dragster. And I'm literally butted up against the dragster, rubbing about a dime size, contact between the dragster and my bump bar on my bicycle, as she brings me back down to 110. We exited around 185. When she hits about 110 on that 2 miles to slow me down, basically 75 miles an hour, she ends up putting the accelerator down, and, as I say, birthed me out of the air pocket, because at 110, I can get out of the air pocket, not a problem. And so when she does that, I then get off race course, and my son has to be coming up on the safety road, and we have to merge together before I fall over on my bicycle. Because again, once I go below 110, I can't pedal. I am literally just floating on that bicycle with my pedals moving, but there's no input because I can't push that gear. And so he comes right up. He has the passenger side window down, and of course you have Wall Street Journal and a few of the other press people in there, and my son's, driving, picking me up, and Facebook Living me. And so I put my arm in the vehicle, and he goes, Mom, you did it. And he somehow said like 186 or 189 or something miles an hour. I don't know what number he said, because he was listening to the radio announcer. And he, because they had live radio announcing, and I look at him, and you can hear me go, what? Because I have no idea what I did. I can't even look down at my bicycle computer, because literally taking my eyeball off of my focal point, which is the bump bar behind the vehicle, and moving it down to my bicycle computer, which is just a GPS speed. It's not official, but it would give me a pretty accurate speed. And then moving my eyeball back up, I literally would go an entire football field in distance. So I can't even look down and look up. 1/1000. There's a football field that just went by, and I did that 19 seconds in a row. I did 1 mile in 19 seconds. I traversed a football field every second that went by in that last mile.
That is mind-blowing.
Yeah. I can't even look and go, let me look over here and back.
Right.
A football field would go by. I could go down in a football field distance in 1 second.
Wow.
So there was nothing but focused on this one. I had this duct tape that was checkered flag right in the center of the bump bar. And that was literally my cue point. And I focused on nothing but that. It was the tunnel vision.
Yeah.
But anyhow, this great video is my son, telling me, and now he's an 18-year-old boy. And I thought, oh, that little shit. Excuse me. Did I say that? I thought he is so pulling my leg because I couldn't believe him. He's my 18-year-old son. He's a jokester. So I'm thinking, he's telling me a joke because the number did not even, we weren't even going for that number. My goal was 170. I just wanted to properly beat 166.9, right? And I'm sitting there going, when he said 186, whatever number, it was a little over what the record was, but I was like, that's so ridiculous. I didn't believe him. So we make a left turn, get to the timing station. And then of course, then you see the rest of the video, which is me realizing, yes, I did get it.
Oh my gosh. Well, and all of this is happening while you are you're on your bike, but your arm is in the car. So you're probably still going at a fairly good speed, right?
About 20 miles an hour. Nothing ridiculous.
But still, to have all of that going on, you're thinking about the speed. He's on his phone, like driving, like just all of it is just mind blowing.
Well, the funniest thing, and I think all parents will understand this, I just went 180 something miles an hour. And I'm sitting there holding on to the car, and he's having to make like a left sort of almost not a U-turn, but, pretty substantial turn to get back to the timing station. And typical mom, careful.
That's awesome.
I'm sitting giving him driving instructions at 20 miles an hour, telling him to be careful while I just finished going 180, right?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's a typical mom moment there, that's for sure. But, it made it amazingly special to have one of my sons, who was the only one that was capable of getting out. I have three boys, but the other two, college, and the other one was in South Dakota. And so it was just not reasonable for the other two to come out. But to be able to have my son out there and be such a pivotal position within the whole speed record too. So.
Oh man. And I am curious, you don't have to get super into detail, but the whole, you described it as the dance between you and your driver. As you're getting up to the speed where you release, what's it called? The
tether.
Tether, thank you. When you get to the point where you release the tether, are you communicating somehow with your driver, whether it's, well, I guess you probably can't do hand motions because you can't lift your hands up. So how are you getting to the point where, or is it just you guys have a great Jedi mind trick at this point where you just know each other?
Great question. And one, she had learned to read my body language because the only form of communication that we had, because we tried audio, radio, and it just would not work for us because of the time that we needed to have that open mic, and we just couldn't find the equipment that was going to work properly for us. So I had no audio from her, and she had no audio to her. So there's no audio communication. She did have 2 cameras that she had video screens mounted in the cockpit that she could see me. So she was able to observe me. But again, there is no suspension in this dragster. So it is just, vibrating along. So she's having to focus on this vibrating little monitor in there to see me. So she would be able to see if I were nodding or if I were shaking my head. She also learned to read me as a cyclist. You can look at another cyclist and you could know they're hammering or they're relaxed. It a lot of times has to do with how, if they're really hunkered down, they're pushing hard and their chest comes up and they're sitting a little more straight up, it's a little easier. So she learned my own body signals to know where I was at as far as pushing hard or relaxed situation. And so the only way I got communication from her was there was 5 lights on the back in the fairing. And it's a 5-mile course, but I would need to know, when are we done? Because I can't look to see the flags out of my periphery because I am so focused on a little, probably, 3-inch diameter circle is my focal point right in front of me. And so these lights, I would be able to see in my periphery because they're pretty much right in front of my face. So she would put 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile, 4 mile, and then the last light was our 5 mile, and it meant we're done. And so that's the only way she communicated with me. However, we also had sort of an abort signal. So she would flash that 5 miles if for any reason we were way before the 5 mile and something went wrong, because she needed to be able to communicate that. But that tether time is probably the scariest time for her, because if you think about it, I've made my choice to be in the back of that, behind that dragster. I made my choice to put my life on the line, and the actions I do affect me and nobody else. Shay Holbrook is driving that vehicle with my life in her hands. Because if she makes a mistake, it's not her, it's me that's going to suffer. And me that could possibly die. I mean, if you want to take it to the extreme. And so one of the things, that dance that we had to figure out, and why it was so important for me to have her both times in 2016 and in 2018, is because she had to, for lack of better words, yank me up to speed as quickly as possible. Because if she did it too slow, my bike can fall over, because it's like when you go downhill, you know how people say, when you go down, let's say, a mountain bike trail. If you try and crawl down a mountain bike trail, you're going to fall over all the time. Speed is actually your friend. It keeps you upright. So you have to have enough of speed to keep yourself upright, to give you that ability to stay upright. Otherwise you fall over. Same with pulling off from the start line. We get the tether nice and taut, so there's no gap, or there's no it is basically nice and tight. So I'm at the extreme of the tether. So when she starts out, she has to start out, but then all of a sudden gain speed very quickly. And like I said, within 1.25 miles, she had me up to at least 110 miles an hour in 1.25 miles, pulling me with one tether. And this tether is connected to a hook that I release. So it's not holding me upright. So if she went too fast, she's going to yank that bicycle right out from under me. She goes too slow, I can't keep upright. I fall over. She's now dragging me because I'm clipped into my pedals, and it would take her a little bit to stop if she was dragging me. So we had to get that perfect balance to where she took off as fast as possible without pulling that bike out from under me. And so one of the beautiful things was she is a national champion water skier. And if you think about it, she's basically the boat driver and I'm the water skier in this situation on the bike. And so her having that knowledge on top of being the race car driver was so important, because she knew exactly how to find that perfect balance of pulling me up to speed as quickly as possible and as safely as possible. But that took a long time for her to figure out, because she didn't really want to pull me that hard. Right. And I kept telling her, no, you got to go faster. Next time, take off faster. And so literally the first few runs back in 2016, it was figuring out that balance of how fast she can yank me, for lack of better words, up to speed. So that's just that beautiful dance of understanding. But to summarize it, is she truly learned to read me, and we were we were in each other's head. I had complete trust in what she did, because my record was because of how fast she drove that car. And technically she drove it faster than she was technically allowed to. That vehicle was safety standard. It was safety inspected for 175 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
And we were not supposed to go over 175. And so she actually violated the rules. And we're lucky they did not pull my record from me, because she went way over 175. Yeah. But and that's all we needed to do. So we felt fine. I mean, I was looking for 170. 175 gave us an extra 5 miles an hour. Either way, we would have broken the record. But instead, she knew I could do it because she took a huge risk by literally flooring that dragster and watched me and knew I could do it. But if she didn't feel I could do it, I mean, it was all in her hands. We didn't start that run ahead of time going, hey, let's blow the doors off this, see how fast we can go. That was 100% her decision. So my record's because she put that accelerator down and I was able to stay in there. But she knew that based on watching me. So again, my life in her hands, because if things were to have gone wrong and she made that decision, she'd be living with that the rest of her life. So we were so in sync with each other. It was unreal.
That is amazing. A quick interruption to give a shout out to Primal Wear. Cycling is their passion and apparel is their craft. So if you're in the market for a new jersey, bibs, mask, or any cycling apparel, go to primalwear.com and use code PRIMALMURPH to get 20% off your purchase. Yes, 20% off. Now back to the show. And the terrain, I know it's called the Salt Flats, but is it like literally, does it feel like pavement? Does it feel like sand? Like what is the terrain?
Yeah, so it is perfectly flat because it is a dry lake bed. It gets wet during the winter and then dries out. And much like an ice skating rink is not going to be hilly. So perfectly flat, but the surface is granular.
Oh, okay.
I would liken it to sort of an asphalt road with a little bit of surface grit.
Okay.
A little bit of teeny marbles on it. Not high marbles, but it's granular. Like it's like rock salt in a way. And now they do drag it. So this particular, the actual course you're on, they drag it to make it as smooth as possible to eliminate some of that grit of the salt on the surface, but they can't get rid of it all. But if you were to go down, which I never did, thank God, I've always programmed my mind to say I'm just going to slide along, because with the granular top, it's almost like a bunch of little marbles. Yep, it's going to be really rough, but it would sort of, float you along. I don't know at what point it would go through my leather suit, because I was wearing a 7.5-pound leather suit for protection and a motorcycle helmet. But still, I in my mind, I had to think about how to answer the question when people would ask me what would happen if I went down, because I didn't want to put any negativity into my mind or the word crash or breaking bones, none of that. Even though Fred Rumpelberg did crash and broke like 13 bones right after John's record when he tried to beat John Howard, and it took him another 7 years to come back to financially and physically recover to break John's record. So I know what could happen out there.
Yeah.
And I embraced it with, that's all right. I go down. I'm just going to go ahead and slide like all those motorcyclists you see on those YouTube videos where they go down and they just go sliding on their back and then they get up at the end. That's what I told myself. So.
Wow. That's awesome that you never had to experience or had to worry about it.
Yes.
So do you know if anyone has been out there trying to break your world record?
I am unaware of anybody who's physically gone out to Bonneville, but of course we had 2020, there was no Bonneville.
Sure.
I did my record in 2018 and I think sort of woke a sleeping giant. My 2016 women's record was sort of quiet, but when I broke the overall record, lots of people sort of sparked a little, I could do that. And there's a lot of people who can think like that, but it's a very, very expensive process. I have been made aware of 5 men from 5 different countries, none of them in the United States, that are looking at breaking the record. Some very much out there with their Facebook pages saying they're going for the world record and keeping updated on everything. And others that are on the QT where I've sort of been made aware of them, but it's not publicly publicly out there yet. But I've not heard any reality of dates being set or entries into the event coming up in September, which would be the place to do it. It would be Bonneville. There are very, very few places in the world like Bonneville where you could accomplish this. So I know they're going to be out there, and that's why I joke with people, because a lot of times, oh, this is the fastest woman in the world. And it's so funny because I'm going to own this while I can. I said, no, no, no. I may be the fastest woman out there, but I am the fastest human. And I'm going to embrace that as many years as I can have that, because I do know there are several men that are going after it, and it will probably get broken. Don't know by how much. I doubt 17 miles an hour, but you never know. But and then I'll be the fastest woman in the world. So I'm owning the human right now, because it is a really cool feat. And what's really neat is, even though Guinness World Book Records separated men's and women's, and technically, according to the record books, I beat my own women's record, if you really want to look at it. What's really cool is when they sent me my other Guinness World Book certificate. I'm actually looking at it right now on the wall. It says the fastest bicycle speed in slipstream. Wow. And it doesn't say woman. So I have the one certificate over here that says female, and then this one over here is just overall, which is really cool, even though it's in the record book as a women's. Yeah. But yeah. So I definitely, I'm going to enjoy that for as long as I have that.
Oh, yeah. Well, you need to enjoy it forever, because it is one heck of a goal and one heck of an accomplishment for sure.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I guess, listeners who have not watched the video, if you just go, I know one website is theprojectspeed.com, but do you have other resources that people can go to?
You know what? Some of the easiest ways is to Google, because there are so many different interviews that I've done. I know Wall Street Journal did an amazing video. That's about like a little mini documentary, about 20 minutes long. And then I know the Great Big Story had done like a 16-minute documentary. Wired magazine did one. So there's a lot of different, and then there's one that we had done with our own videographers. So a number of those are there. If you just Google Project Speed Denise or Bicycle Denise or Fastest Bicycle Denise or something along those lines, they'll definitely pop up. I'm pretty active on my Facebook page, which does link to my Instagram. And so the handle for that is @FireCycle, FireCycle. So if you look on Facebook and Instagram, you'll be able to see a lot of the more or less what I'm doing today too.
Right. Awesome. Well, Denise, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. And I feel like I'm probably going to hang up with you and watch the video one more time, because it's just like, talk about adrenaline.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you. And it was funny. Some of the gentlemen that I met from Primal, they came from Denver. I hadn't met them before, and we hung out all together for that week, which was just awesome. I feel like, again, an extension of my family again. Got a text message from one of them, and he says, I just watched the video and I think I got a tear in my eye knowing you and having watched the video. Because it's a different reference point when you hear a lot more of the behind the scenes, I guess you'd say,
for
on
sure,
it.
yeah.
And then you rewatch it again, and it sort of puts it in a whole different perspective, given the extra information. So
yeah. Okay, last question. When you watch the video of yourself, do you actually acknowledge that that's you? Like, do you look at that and go, hey, that's me right there? Or do you go, holy crap?
Probably the holy crap, because I know it's me. I know that's what I did, but my heart will race, because I know some of the moments coming up when I have to jut my knee out, because the buffeting of the wind left to right gets so intense. The faster I go, it feels like I'm being literally like the wind is trying to act as I'm a ping pong left to right. And so the bicycle handling skills, and even when I see it, I know I survived it because I'm here watching the video. Right. But I see the spot where I end up having, I'm coming over to the left and I have to jut my right knee out to center myself again, and it still catches me every time. But how close that was! Wow, absolutely, how close that was, and it's just. So it's a lot of respect. Yeah. Because I look there and go, oh, wow. Yep. And to answer one question that hasn't been asked, no, I'm not going to go out there again. I have nothing more to prove. Even if somebody breaks it, I've had enough little taps from God on the shoulder going, I kept you upright.
Yeah.
You did this twice. Don't do it again. So I heard the message loud and clear. So I be done.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Denise.
Oh, you bet. Thank you.
Well, listeners, that's it for this week. Thank you, Denise, for coming on to tell us a bit more about what it's like to be the fastest cyclist on Earth. You must Google Denise Mueller and watch the video of her doing it. It will make your heart race. And also check out our website, theprojectspeed.com. Email me at murphologypodcast@gmail.com if you have a topic or the name of a cyclist you find interesting. Support my podcast at patreon.com/murphology. Visit my Instagram page for daily entertainment and check out my website for all kinds of bicycle stuff. I'll leave you with this quote from the Unwritten Book of Murphology. This quote comes from today's guest, Denise Mueller. There is a fine line between living as if this is your last day on Earth and planning for your future. I choose to dance, sing, and play on that fine line and live without regrets. Think about it.